So my name is Brian Dannon. I'm from Georgia Tech. I work in their Institute Communications office, and I'm lead of the digital media team. For the last couple of years before that, I was leading, well, I wasn't leading, I was a senior web developer and developing and building on the top-level website, gotech.edu. Institute Communications, for those of you who don't know, is sort of like our internal ad agency at Georgia Tech. So we support the 6 colleges and over 25 schools across campus with all of their media, web, and all of these other sorts of needs. So they'll come over to our office, we'll consult with them, we'll help them out. We do some of it internally. We don't have that large of a team, and so our senior web developers, of which there are 3, they're usually busy just keeping on top of our gotech.edu. So then we connect them with freelance talent. And a lot of them also have in-house web developers and media folks within their schools. So we'll help them and make sure that we're all sort of collaborating on things together for sort of a collective goal. So this is an overview. I'll be going over my background, sort of how I made my way from PHP to Drupal. Why Drupal is a platform, my platform of choice, as well as for business, in my opinion. How Drupal enables me and at Georgia Tech to enable multimedia presentations utilizing photos and videos. And then ultimately, Drupal is scalable. It has longevity to back it up, and it's efficient. So just to go over my background briefly, I'm originally from Colorado, and I was born there, grew up there. Then I went up to Vancouver to do my Bachelor's of Fine Arts. I studied design and film and video. Then came down to Atlanta. I also went up to Washington, D.C., was a CTO of a startup company where I managed a large portfolio of websites, did a lot of video editing. And then I got my MBA at Georgia Tech in May 2010, and then right after that, I ended up working in their Institute Communications office. This is important because this is ultimately what led me to utilizing these web technologies and Drupal. So for me, it all sort of started with a still camera, shooting onto celluloid film. So I'm a photographer originally by trade, and I was capturing onto 35 millimeter film, 16 millimeter motion film, Super 8, other motion 35. And then I wanted to put this all into a computer to display this, showcase this, and all of the video projects I was working on, I would build a collaborative marketing web projects, websites for these multimedia projects that I was working on. And none of this would have been possible without open source web technologies. Up here I have a picture of one of the first open source frameworks I started with, which was PixelPost, and it's still around today. It's pretty much the same. It's great if all you want to do is put one photograph up a day. And this was all leveraging LampStack. I'm not a CS major. I didn't go to school to learn how to code websites. So I was picking up what was freely available and something that I could understand and quickly learn on, and that was the LAMP stack with PHP, MySQL, and Apache. And what we have today that I think is so unique and what I'm excited about is that we're working with these emergent technologies. And this is what enables us to power multimedia and interaction amongst one another, and we're all doing it through a new interface, which is a web screen, whether it's mobile, in your hand on an iPad, or when you're sitting down in front of a laptop or a desktop. And now, today, we have new ways that we're able to communicate amongst one another. It's also providing new tools for us to organize all of our materials, all of our media assets. And this has created a new space for us so that we can all socialize in a way that wasn't possible before all of this happened. And it's still relatively new, and we're still defining it. So I went through a lot of trials and tribulations as I was building all of these media web projects. And like I said, I started in sort of custom building PHP projects. I also founded a short film festival, the Vancouver Short Film Festival. And we had somebody in London build the website for us, and luckily they built it in PHP. I inherited that when our web developer left. And so I was left to figure that out, train new staff on how to use it. And PHP was really easy to just teach somebody who just knew how to use a computer how to manage and build on top of a website. Ultimately, that film festival, we ended up moving into WordPress. I was moving all of my stuff into WordPress at that time. And WordPress was a platform that made it easy to manage my content, a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, I still felt a lot of shortcomings. I was custom building my own feed aggregators, essentially, through cron scripts and PHP. And I thought, well, this is a little bit silly. This isn't that complicated. Surely people have done more of these out there that I can just find, copy, and utilize, something that's been tested and works. And it wasn't just feed aggregation and RSS aggregation. It was a whole host of other multimedia problems I was running into with WordPress. All of my searches and everyone I talked to just kept pointing me to my new framework of choice, which is, of course, why I'm speaking here today. It's Drupal. This really did start to satisfy all of my needs in terms of these more complex web functions. And the community was actually stronger than what I had seen in WordPress when it came to advanced development. So I was able to take all of the projects I was working on and jumpstart them and push them further. And then it also allowed me to build more collaborative systems. So, you know, why choose Drupal over either a custom-built system or something else? And so the three main points that I want to point out with regards to Drupal is that it's scalable. It has a really good track record. Its longevity is really obvious, and it's efficient. It's easy to use and pretty lightweight. So in terms of a business platform, the reason that it's so important is it provides us with ownership over our data, over our code base. Like I said, the longevity gives, and the historical proof to back it up. It also has consistency in that regard. So when you install something today, you know what it's going to look like, you know what that code base is going to look like, and you know what your developers are actually putting in the back end. It has a lot of growth potential due to its efficiency and the fact that it can scale. And one of the things I'm most excited about is the capability to build customer relationship management systems, as well as project management systems, and have them be fully integrated into a website. So to get started with the ownership of your data and why this is important for what you're doing as a business, and then ultimately this is extremely important for us at Georgia Tech. We don't want to be building all of our websites and systems in some cloud where we don't know where that data is, or we don't know who controls what that web code is and the design itself. So in a proprietary system, you really do get locked in. And so when I first started as a web developer at Georgia Tech, I was talking to other communicators running their websites, and we still have some proprietary systems on campus. And I was just sort of asking why, and they were very concerned about security, and you just don't know what you're going to get with a proprietary system. There's actually, in a proprietary system, they're going to be more likely to say, oh, yes, it's secure, and not let you know about the security breaches as they come out. We saw this happen just a few months ago with Oracle when they had a major security breach, and they didn't let the community know for 2 or 3 months. You don't find that happening in Drupal. As soon as there's a security breach, you can actually patch your site and fix day 0, day 1 exploits immediately. And then you own your data. You know where it is. You know where your database is, where the code system is. And this is one of the most important assets you have as a business or as a public institution. And it allows you to back up your data, migrate it when you want to, and ultimately you have control over what is the biggest and best front-end asset that you have as a business owner. One good example of this is our admission site at Georgia Tech. Originally, this was a custom PHP system, and they were a little bit hesitant as to what they should go to next, and we started talking with them. Ultimately, they decided to go with Drupal. The build-out was relatively quick. It only took maybe 5 weeks. And at the end of the day, the communications officer, who we'd been collaborating with, came back to us within 2 or 3 weeks of it running on Drupal, and the first thing he told us was, we are so happy that we decided to go with Drupal as our platform, as opposed to a custom PHP build, because that was the other thing that they were weighing in terms of an option. And the reason for this was, Our communication director, he's not a coder, he doesn't have a CS degree either, but he's still able to go in, create page after page, manage all of the pages, control the menus, and fine-tune the messaging so that it fits exactly what he wants it to look like, and then he is able to hire more people and have his other staff members go in and collaborate on this page. And it's very consistent. Whenever he needed help, he could call on our department, he could call on people in the College of Computing or at GTRI. And since we're all working on the same system, we're able to share that information and best practices from site to site and from one experience to another. Likewise, it was a few weeks later that he said, well, now I need a mobile site. So, I started talking to them and said, well, you probably don't want to have a separate site because then you're going to have to maintain 2 different pieces of content or 2 different databases of content. And they have several hundred pages because of all of the different permutations of types of admission requests that they get. So we called the same company, the same freelance company that helped us to build the original site, and they came back. They were already familiar with the site. And one of the powers of using Drupal versus a proprietary system is if that freelancer that we had hired the first time, if it didn't work out that well, if there's some problem, we would not be locked in. We'd be able to go find any Drupal vendor out there. But luckily, we had a really good relationship with them, and we were able to continue working with them. And they just pretty much put a new theme on top of their old site. And then through HTML5 and JavaScript, it figures out what size is your screen, and if it's a handheld screen, it sends you over to the mobile theme, which is fully responsive. And this way, you have a mobile customized experience that will work on any platform, whether it's iOS, Android. It's still a little bit strange in Internet Explorer, but it does work and it's easy to use. But that's a problem with Internet Explorer, of course. Another good example is our licensing and trademark website. This was a static PHP site. Most of our top-level web infrastructure when I started was still static PHP, and we're working as fast as we can to push everything into Drupal. And we're doing a pretty good job. We're moving pretty quickly. And every single time we migrate a site, we see the benefits almost immediately. And this is one of those examples. Anytime our licensing manager wanted a change to the website, she would have to send it to our code and web team. And along with all of the other things that they have to do, now we have to make very minor updates to language, or if a new vendor has come in and she wants them added to the website. And these very simple changes could take us 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks. As soon as we put it on Drupal, she's like, wait, I can do this myself. I can just push that edit button, and I can change the name of that vendor, or I can just add a new vendor. She was kind of confused. Really, it's that easy? And it is that easy. And ever since we built this for her, she has quit sending web requests our way, and we're able to focus more on our core tasks. And I'll get to more of what we're building in our office in a little bit. And so this is a prime example of how we're using this at Georgia Tech, and it just proves how scalable the system really does become, especially as you roll it out over a larger scale system. But it even applies to smaller businesses as well. And one of the really nice things about Drupal, especially in what we're doing at Georgia Tech, we want to make sure that when we install a web system or a website, that it's going to work for at least a few years, maybe even longer. Our current website we've had in place for 5 or 6 years, and we'll be upgrading it soon over the next 6 to 9 months. And when we do that upgrade, we want to make sure that it's going to be a good-looking website that we can use for a while, and the code base isn't going to suddenly be pulled out, the rug pulled out from under us. And so Drupal has this track record, and you can look back. And so I pulled up the chart from Wikipedia just to sort of see, spell it out right here in front of you. And the first code that came out with Drupal was in 2000. And you can see that major iterations, they don't happen overnight, which is nice because then we're not having to upgrade our website immediately after installing it. So you can feel confident that when you install a site or a system onto a Drupal platform, you're going to be able to keep that website and keep building on top of it for several years, usually about 5 years until your major version is moonlighted. And even then, it's still a really stable system, but it's always good to be on one of those current, the current two that are maintained for security. So I've talked a little bit about scalability, and this is one of the biggest aspects of using Drupal over something else. The multi-site system and the way that it works is it's really easy. You've got your sites directory, and you just start building new sites in there, and then it's all using the same core installation. And that's one aspect of scalability, is that you can quickly scale out several hundred sites in one core. And when you run an update on one of those sites, it will apply that update across the system of that multi-site. But at the same time, you're able to have multiple members come in and manage a website all at one time. And it's these multifaceted teams that really make Drupal scalable. So working with the legal team at Georgia Tech, one of the things I did is I rebuilt their whole property of websites, which was about 8 or 9 of them. And from that point on, again, it was the same thing as licensing. They no longer had to come to us for changes. Their staff members, who are lawyers, again, not trained in computer science, don't know anything about computer code, but they do know about regulations and when public documents must be posted to be compliant. And that's incredibly important. And sometimes they don't have 4 or 5 weeks to wait for a document to get posted online, because then they'll be out of compliance during that amount of time, which is a risk and a liability for the institution. So after these sites were built, our legal team is then able to go, sign on, upload the documents that they need to remain compliant. And then this is a good example. So I was working with them afterward to build this policy library. This is a really, really large build out. We were aggregating something like 1,000 or 1,500, probably more, policies from all different sorts of systems that had been authored in different ways. And we needed them on one site because we had policies that were contradicting each other. And they needed to be in one site, and then we had a glossary of terms. So it's just a content type that's called glossary, and you create a term, and then through node reference, when you create a new policy on this system, you can reference one of those terms. And then this way, when you have multiple policies using the same term, you know it's actually using the same term because it's that one term that's in the database. And so we got a team across campus to actually build this out for us over at the Georgia Tech Research Institute. And then our web team, we helped them out to make sure that they were going along the right path, using the right themes, and installing it on the right servers within our central OIT infrastructure. And since we're all speaking the same language, we're all building it on the Drupal framework, we know that it's going to work, and this has been a really successful and quick build. As opposed to if we had tried to do this with a custom system or anything else, it would have probably taken 3 times longer. It probably wouldn't have worked at all, actually. And as soon as it was close to being ready to push out there, well, they didn't have the content yet, so they went and they hired 5 temp students. And again, because the content authoring is so easy, and we had already built and tested a lot of the parameters to make sure that when you plug that content in, everything fits together. 5 people were then inputting content, and we had all the content there within 3 weeks. So this is one of the most exciting things about Drupal for me, is the ability to manage projects, manage teams, and then manage your customer relationships as well. And I think this is really important in terms of a business framework. So in the back, I've shown an open atrium that I built for Georgia Tech where we keep all of our notes. So when we onboard new people to our team, we have notes on how our systems are set up, how to best set up your local development environment, and then how we follow very specific protocols so that we're all building using the same sort of constructs and parameters across the board. And then this also promotes that scalability and inter-team collaboration. You sign on with your Georgia Tech username, it's in there. This is done through organic groups, so some people can see information specific to their group but not other groups. And then a lot of these things are being upgraded in Drupal 7, so one of the ones I've just started looking at recently is Open Outreach. And this leverages Red Hen, which is a CRM, customer relationship management tool that interacts with all of your contacts. And I haven't quite figured out how to make it work the best way yet because it's so new, but I think it's going to be really exciting. And then this is a way that we can fine-tune our customer relationship data from a business point of view and also to use it, hopefully, at Georgia Tech. And we're able to do this through quick innovation. So I use OpenAtrium at home for a lot of my personal projects, and so when I figure out a way to do something that works really well at home, I'm able to take that code or that feature, use the old copy and paste buttons, and then put it in, and then it's being used at Georgia Tech the next day. And it's through this code sharing that we're able to do this. And this is one example that I bring up. I built this website for a company that does training for federal agencies. And he does courses and training, so one of the most important things for him was having this calendar system. And he's not a computer expert either, but he just goes in, he says, new calendar button. He clicks the new calendar item button that's on the top when he signs in. He creates the calendar. There's a drop-down list of 5 different types of courses he teaches, and then it shows up on his calendar. So at Georgia Tech, we were looking for some sort of a solution for collaborating amongst our media teams. We wanted to see when things were happening, and we wanted to have it on one calendar. So we went out to the market, and we started looking for calendar solutions that would provide this functionality. Everything we found had way too many features, and the core thing we wanted didn't really work right, didn't do exactly what we wanted, and the costs were insane. They were exorbitant. So I showed my team this calendar that I built, and I was like, is this kind of what you're going for? And they're like, well, that's exactly it. That's so simple. That's all we need. 2 weeks later, I was done because I took the calendar from the other site and reskinned it, and I made some specific modifications to fit their team's parameters and what they needed. And they started using it right away, and they have 10 people in here creating calendar entries. Actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's 20 or 30 people. And then you can actually limit your view just by filtering, and you can hide some of the calendars if you'd like. And later on, we'll be able to add more calendars, but I think right now it's working just as they wanted it to. It's really simple. It displays 6 different calendars at once. You can see what kind of events are happening on the same day. And then we're able to collaborate better across our department of 40 in Institute Communications when we're working on all of this. And anybody across campus can go on and look at the calendar as well. So actually it facilitates communications even larger and more broad than just our team of 40. And so this is ultimately what drove me to Drupal in the first place, was multimedia. So this is sort of the last section of what I'll be talking about. I started in photography, and that's what led me to web development. And then I got really into videography, and that's what really started to break all of the websites, especially 10 years ago. There's no good way of putting videos online, and now that's all anybody wants to do. And then, of course, social media is the biggest and best thing, so it does help us quite a bit with social media at Georgia Tech as well. So just in terms of sharing, this is over on the left-hand side is just a breakdown of what you see when you sign into our central news and syndication service, which is built on Drupal 6. It leverages organic groups. And what we do with our central news and syndication service, anybody on campus who has a campus login can sign in. They'll be assigned a group. They have to request a group first, and then we assign them a group. But we have hundreds and thousands of people in here doing this every day. You create all of your images or your videos, and each one of those is a separate node all by itself. So our media and our content are separate. So we can create one image, give it a title, give it a description, tag it with some keywords. That one image can then be used across multiple stories. And we're going to be looking into broadening what these images do, building slideshows out of these images. So we've got a thematic set of images that you can then embed the slideshow onto any one of the news stories. And then you create the news stories separately, and you attach your images on to the news stories just using node reference. And then with our Mercury module that we created, if you're on another Drupal site, you install the Mercury module, and you create feeds of different news stories. And so a news story, like I said, already has all of the media items embedded into it, including authors. Authorship is another node type that you can attach to news stories. And then you just type in your feed ID, which is the node ID itself, and then boom, that feed is up on your website. And it's pre-styled, but it also comes with classes so that you can go in CSS and very custom style it to that specific website's need. And so what we do then is we also have this other system that's called the amplifier. We take blog posts from all of our experts and people across Georgia Tech, and we have people in France, in Japan, in Hong Kong, and then we'll put them on our Amplifier blog. And through Feeds Aggregator, every day our news team, they sign into the website, they look at it, and they see all of these new stories that have come up, and they're able to select the ones that are specific to the hot topic that's being talked about in the news that day. And then they choose the 2 or 3 that they want to throw on the Amplifier blog, and then those 3 different perspectives are right there at the top of the blog. And it facilitates a lot of discussion, and then we're able to push these out to various multimedia sites. And we were able to put this blog together and have all that functionality. Because it's Drupal, I don't think we would have been able to do this if we hadn't been using Drupal as our base framework. So these are just a few different examples of various different ways that you can use Drupal and what we're doing at Georgia Tech. So I've talked about our Mercury syndication system a bit, and ultimately this is what feeds up to and powers our newsroom. So anybody who puts in a story into that Mercury news and syndication service has the ability then to be featured on the newsroom. It just has to be in Mercury. And then our news team, then they go in, and it's very similar to the Amplifier blog, but it's also a little bit more automated. So if it's tagged with the category research and economic news, it'll show up there, and this shows what the most recent one is. And we have fine-tuned permissions as well. So while anybody can author a story, they're not necessarily able to approve and publish a story. Only the communications directors within the schools are actually able to push the approve and publish. And they'll often have students or interns writing these stories for them, and as soon as they push submit, it goes into a draft status. It notifies the group admin, and then that group admin knows to go sign in, and if the story's done right and after it's been proofread, then they push publish, and then it actually shows up on our main page. And this just makes sure that we do have sets of checks and balances in place through robust permissions so that we don't have glaring spelling mistakes or embarrassing things showing up on our top-level website. In terms of photography at Georgia Tech, this is one of the first sites I built when I got in there as a senior web developer. We had a custom PHP gallery that we'd built, quite similar to Pixel Post, actually. And it just wasn't working anymore. It hadn't been upgraded. There's probably some security flaws in there as well. So, we were faced with the question, do we rebuild this gallery system, or do we use something else? So ultimately, we looked around at some options and decided, well, Flickr's pre-built the gallery thing for us. It just works. The professional version costs $25 a year. It's really very cost effective. And so now we manage all galleries through Flickr. We benefit from the social aspect of using Flickr as well, so more people are able to see our photographs. And then our media team, our digital media team, once we have the photographs up in a set in Flickr, they can go on to our Photos at Tech site. They push new Flickr page, or new page, and then they put that Flickr set, an ID of 11 characters, and then they put the menu where they want it to go, and then boom, it's already up here. It light shows, or it's a light box display. And so people are able to see all of our photos at Georgia Tech on this one Georgia Tech web page with the lightbox display, and they never leave our site. Even though it is powered by Flickr, they're still never leaving our website, which is important. They don't get distracted by all of these other things that are not Georgia Tech. And we find that to be important. And so I already talked a little bit about the photo galleries and slideshows, but this is one of the more advanced features that I'll be working on and building over the next few weeks, is how to do these slideshows like you see on the Huffington Post. Through videos and photos, and that you can attach them to different news stories. And this is another example of how we're using Drupal to power videos at Georgia Tech. I quickly built this site, and then through the media modules, we're able to take, it's pretty much the same thing as the last thing I was showing with Flickr. You take the YouTube ID, which is like 7 characters, and you just put it in the video page, and then you've got a new video page, and that video light boxes out. And so you have people watching all of our YouTube videos, but it's specifically curated for one audience. In this case, I'm showing the Impact website. And they're not leaving our Georgia Tech properties online. They're not being diverted by YouTube and all of their ads and all of these other things, and quickly, you don't know where you are anymore. And Drupal was extremely helpful when I needed to put together various feeds for getting Georgia Tech onto iTunes U. We had built an internal media server specific to Apple standards, and so we could put all of our videos up on iTunes U. And then, of course, Apple went and changed their standards without asking our permission. And we'd prefer Apple asked our permission. No, I'm just joking. And so I had to refactor all of the metadata feeds that were coming out of this media server. So what I did is I created a feed aggregator yet again and pulled hundreds and hundreds of video items into Drupal, and then through views, refactored the RSS output and the metadata so that it fit the new Apple standards. And then this allowed us to get all of our media and videos up onto iTunes U much more quickly and efficiently. And then today we have a variety of different hosting methods for iTunes U. Some of them are on campus using our own servers, and then some of them are on the Apple servers as well. It just gives people another option on how to get their videos up onto iTunes U. And so Drupal also makes it a lot easier to just sort of share and integrate out into the world of social media. We needed to put together a quick set of best practices and social media guidelines. And again, I just copied and pasted our template, put up the page, and then our media team wrote it all down on the website. And then the page was up. This took us 2 days to build, and traditionally before Drupal was around, it would have been a several-week process just to build it all and get all the right people pushing the right buttons at the right time to make the website go live. And this is another way that we're sharing social media assets using Drupal. I didn't have very much time, but they wanted this website where they could post all of these backgrounds for mobile devices. And if you go on here, you can actually get Google Plus headers, Facebook headers. I think there's also some Twitter backgrounds. And so anybody can go on here and download this now. But like I said, I didn't have enough time to build all of this, so I just put the basic framework in place, which took me about a half day to do. And then the people who wanted the site in my office, I just showed them really quickly. It took about a half hour of me sitting down with them. It was the first time they'd really used Drupal in depth. And just showed them, well, here's how to create that content. Here's how to get it to lay out the way you want. And that was all she needed. She was up and running and moving along. And she built out this whole web page over the next 2 days while I was working on other projects. And I've had a lot of success recently integrating Twitter and Drupal and marrying those together. So the best example I have of that is on this TechDraw website that I built. And you can see the Twitter feed over on the left-hand side. And I'm again using the feeds aggregator, but on cron runs, it picks up the Twitter feed just using the Twitter API. If there's a new Twitter post, it pulls it directly onto the website. It's in the database as a node. This is extremely important for SEO. So everything that this author writes on his Twitter feed ends up on his website, on his web page, as a physically posted node. And as the robots start crawling his website more, every single Twitter post he's done is adding to his SEO. And it includes all of these links and link backs and everything like that as well. So it's going to be extremely effective. And it's also, people can see what the Twitter feed is, again, without leaving the website. It's right there, and they're not getting distracted by clicking the Twitter button and being launched over to a new site if they don't want. And so we're going to have a lot more social integrations coming forward as we have time. And so I've explained a few of them. And this is another really hot area. And you can recreate anything that you see on one of these social networks. And this is one of the really cool things I like about Drupal. You can go and create the same experience internally on your website. You can create Facebook-style layouts and displays, Pinterest-style layouts and displays. And you can create that experience all within your branded environment. And so it really does help with your own initiatives when it comes to marketing and communication and keeping everybody together on one platform. So ultimately, the reason that we're using Drupal and why I always recommend Drupal over any other platform is that it wins at the core 3 metrics that I look at when I'm building a web system. It's scalable, it's established, it has that track record of longevity, and ultimately it's efficient. Due to its simplicity, you can do pretty much anything with it, and you don't get stuck with all of these bloated features. At the end of the day, the core system, Drupal 6 was 2.5 megabytes, Drupal 7's maybe a megabyte more. And then the minimal install only installs maybe 3 or 4 modules, so you don't have things overlapping or competing with one another. So that's the end of my talk. So are there any questions at this point? Yes? Give us just a little more information about your calendar module. OK, so you want to know a little bit more about the calendar module? Yeah, so the calendar module, let me go back and find it. There it is. It's very basic. It works on date API, and just a content type, and then the view display. I actually used the pre-built view template for calendars in Drupal 7, and that's what's doing most of this. No, this is it comes built into views. Yeah. And then I ended up building a feature out of it, and that's how I was able to export it from one site to the other, just using features after I built it in the first site. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes. OK, so the question was talking about the backend scalability, things that we've installed to promote scalability, and then my impressions and ideas about LampStack, right? So on the backend, one of the things that we've got working, our core website, gotek.edu, is still a PHP website right now, but very soon it will be on Drupal 7, and we have it staged on Drupal 7. And in our staging environment, we've got Varnish worked out. So Varnish is allowing for scalability for mass amounts of folks to be able to come in and view the page at once. It's also built on top of load balancing rotators. I think there's 6 boxes that it rotates out to. So we end up having a local environment, a staging environment, a master environment, and then the master pushes out to 6 simultaneous load balancing rotators. And those are actually virtual machines. So if we ever really get hit with hundreds of thousands or millions of users, those machines can then replicate themselves. And instead of having 6 front-end boxes, we could technically have several hundred virtual boxes on the front end. And that seems to be working really well. We've also been working on installing memcached for the database itself. And this is only really useful if you're getting tens and hundreds of thousands of hits every single day onto your web properties. And at that point, it's extremely helpful. It's night and day difference. I think when we installed Varnish the first time, we were looking at what that actually did to our web loads. And I think it was about 100x increase in terms of performance. It's somewhere between 10 and 100, depending on exactly what you were doing. But if you don't have a super high traffic website, you can just go on, make sure all of the caching is turned on just in the development performance administrative area of Drupal. That helps quite a bit, but then also you need to make sure that you go through all of your views, and you can specifically turn on caching on any block that you have that's been produced through views, on any page that you have that's been produced by views. And you just have to go in, it's under the advanced settings in views, and you turn on the caching, and doing that alone, you'll see significant increases. In terms of the LAMP stack, the stack that I build on is actually the Zend stack. And while not all of our properties are on Zend, we use Red Hat primarily and Zend, depending on where the site is exactly, on what box it's on. We've been really happy with it. I know there's been a lot of discussion about Nginx being able to outperform LAMP and all of that. But I've also been hearing that Apache 3, or the next version of Apache that's coming out, is going to outperform Nginx by a factor of 50%. So I wouldn't recommend switching over to a new system, because Apache is going to continue to get better, and it will be faster, and we already know how well it works. And likewise with MySQL, you see the same things. And I know that Drupal itself is actually building on MariaDB. And as far as I can see it, the things just aren't that much different to make that. They work really well. They work for the WhiteHouse.gov. They work for us at Georgia Tech. So I don't think the benefits are there to go to a different stack as opposed to LAMP. And then if you can stay on it, it works. You know how it works. You can leverage the community of way more people than any of the other systems. And then when the next versions come out, they will be significantly faster. So I think it's worth sticking around on the LAMP stack. Yes? Yeah, so this is a question about streamed media, whether it's streamed audio or streamed video, and how we can utilize Drupal and the Drupal system to facilitate that, especially with private access permissions and things like that. So we actually do that a lot at Georgia Tech. We have a Wowza server that we've built that powers live streaming. And this is a really great use case, actually, of how to use this. You really do, if you're going to power streaming media, you need to make sure you're plugged into a CDN and RTMP server. It's fundamentally different than HTTP and progressive downloads. But barring that, you can still stream lightweight media, especially like audio, directly off of HTTP without much problem. And if you only have a few users or viewers, it's not going to be much of a problem. And you could actually even do this with YouTube, like an unlisted video or a live stream. But what you do is you just embed it into a page. So you create like a new page type that allows for iframe. At Georgia Tech, we're using the JW player, so it's a JavaScript player. And then that page you can just lock off access-wise, so nobody can view that page. There'd be no way of somebody intercepting that live stream and viewing it, and especially in this specific instance of using a Wowza server and the JW player on a private page. You can lock off those permissions and have it be role-based and use the Drupal systems. I have another site that I built that actually does what you're saying. I upload a bunch of MP3s, and then I use JPlayer, not to be mistaken with JW Player. JW Player is the video player. JPlayer is the open source HTML5 audio player. And then so through JPlayer, it streams those directly off of the file system. And that seems to work really well. I've tested it on Android and iOS. It works a lot better on iOS. And then, of course, it works on desktop as well. I believe you can. I haven't done that specifically myself. And the best way of doing it would be through a CDN service like Amazon S3 or something else like that. You know, there's a bunch of these services, Brightcove, Akamai. You know, Akamai being the biggest, and people are also doing it a lot with the Amazon S3 servers. That's how you really should be doing it, because CDNs and RTMP servers are built very specifically to do that function. And if you're going to be doing this on a large scale, you know, anything more than 15 or 20 simultaneous users, I mean, you're really pushing it at that point. You need to be on a CDN. And we'll often have streams that we have several hundred people viewing one video display at once. This is what we use for when we live stream our commencement ceremonies at Georgia Tech, is through our Wowza server. And that can easily handle, you know, thousands of people, and we can fine tune what the data rate is. So if it looks like it's hiccuping, we can just lower that data rate. And I think depending on your player itself, you can have the data rate auto increment depending on what the person's bandwidth is as well. Okay. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate you having me out here and talking about Georgia Tech.